thought it was over.
Hello everyone, it's Carissa, now back as an adult picking up my old series that aims to review every Donkey Kong Country episode. Now this may be released on April Fool's Day to match the episode I'll be covering, hopefully, but I'm dead serious about this. I was researching about how to become a better writer for an English assignment I had, because I didn't want to be cringe, and I found some tips. One of these tips is to seek out bad scripts and write down the problems with them. Of course, this show's problems go far beyond a bad script, but that's what I'm doing now, half for myself, half to put some Donkey Kong content out into the world, because Lord knows we need it. So I said April Fool's Day, but from here on, that's wrong. On Congo Bongo Island, their holiday is All Fool's Day, which is an Animal Crossing-ass name for a holiday, but this episode is called Just Kidding. The episode opens with some classic deception, the old classic of Diddy Kong faking having an alliance with Donkey Kong so they can finally prank Cranky Kong this year. However, Cranky is the prank master this episode, so that alliance is a fake because Cranky walks up and Donkey Kong's chair collapses, which is a prank. The pranks are so excessive and political, it's probably more accurate to call them random acts of long-form cruelty and unpleasant surprises than anything. Another key element to this is the fact that pranks are verified by the pranky saying, Well, I'll be a monkey's uncle," which is incredibly forced. They don't do the starter part. So forced, in fact, that the opening has its basic format replaced. It's only an opening in the sense that it happens first. The amount of times in this episode where a scene is literally just Cranky tricking Candy, Diddy, or Donkey Kong, meanwhile they try to resist his pranks, is 4. Every single one of these scenes is before any conflict in the story starts. That's like, why? Aren't you supposed to make the conflict the interesting part of the story, not just something that happens for a collective 5 minutes scattered across the episode? That's also another thing for writing, the rule of 3. The rule of 3 typically applies to jokes. It says you shouldn't tell the same joke or refer to the same joke more than 3 times. But it also applies to other aspects of writing, such as unique words. They also violate it with this joke where a barrel gets dropped on King K. Rool or Donkey Kong every time someone says the word now. The first time I saw it, it's like, okay, forgivable, this is a children's TV show, but then it becomes less forgivable, and on the 5th time, I'm not forgiving you. As for dialogue, everyone just says exactly what they are thinking or doing, and it's boring in that way. When Donkey Kong gets pranked, he will say, "I'm so embarrassed!" And this only really works for K. Rool, because it's actually natural for him to be boastful, to show off his cruelty. Like when he says this.
I still don't see the joke, sir.
But I do! And you are the joke clump!
Well, hey! I don't get it.
You fell for my joke! And that, my ignorant iguana, is the point of All Fool's Day!
I think it's actually good because it matches his regular interests and treatment of other characters, whereas Cranky is just a prank god who loves explaining his every prank. This is a kids show, so it's kind of inevitable, but there are some counterexamples. I went back in to watch the episode that my old rankings had at number 1 on the list to find out. The show actually opened with what could be called showing not telling for the purposes of a kids show. In that episode, they find an old photo of K. Rool and Cranky Kong together, but thankfully, they get to just show Diddy Kong and Donkey Kong being shocked, instead of saying something like, "But that's impossible because they dislike each other now." They actually get the fact that they only have to explain their characters' thoughts, so viewers aren't confused, instead of just filling time. The other times in that better episode, the characters seem like they actually want to talk to each other, which is something rare for this show. So the main plot point of this episode isn't actually reached until halfway through the episode, which I alluded to earlier. In a weird prank attempt, Donkey Kong decides to dress up as King K. Rool, and in the prank, he'll scare Cranky by taking the crystal coconut. If you haven't watched my reviews before, the crystal coconut is a MacGuffin. It's just a wish-granting coconut that the Kongs protect and the Kremlins try to steal. So the obvious conflict comes into play when Candy Kong thinks the real K. Rool is Donkey Kong in disguise. In a way, it's all her fault. On a side note, I want to retract a statement I made in my youth. I believe I once put a text overlay on the screen which said, quote, Candy Kong's a bitch. I've since come to reject that language in recognizing that it is misogynistic, especially in this context. With that said, Candy Kong is a vile woman. The resolution to this plot comes fairly quickly, like in most 20-minute TV shows, but it also happens to be the only good part of this episode. Basically, Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong, they go on a mission to gaslight the Kremlins. As soon as they pull up, they break into song. It's a tolerable rap where Donkey Kong tries to convince K. Rool that the coconut is cursed. He does this by repeatedly pranking him throughout the song. On K. Rool's end, his verses are all denying the pranks until he eventually agrees. I say tolerable, though, because they could try way harder to make this rhyme, and that failure doesn't work well over the beat they use. The ending was pretty good, other than the fact that the theme was just, narrowed to an unnecessary degree. The way it worked was in the resolution, Cranky says something like, Pranks are good, except not when the crystal coconut is involved. Really, that just reinforces my view that pranks to them are random acts of violence, considering their pranks consist of a chair that launches people through their roof or spreading itching powder to multiple people at once. So, like chemical attacks loosely. Its theme revolves around something inherently unrelatable, a MacGuffin, which is purely a storytelling device. As a final note, this episode fails at expressing continuity within characters and makes me detached from liking the characters. Clump asks what a joke is at 5 minutes in, and then makes a quip demonstrating he knows a lot about jokes a few minutes later. I think this demonstrates a problem with the writing of this show in that they struggle to establish coherent characters. Like, if you take Candy Kong at her worst episodes, you would think, damn, this is the worst ape to be around on the island. But then at other times, they try to make her seem friendly or loving to Donkey Kong. Similarly, the dialogue could not stick to demonstrating that Clump is ignorant about jokes and comedy as a whole. They had to break that just to get a quip in. This would be way worse in long form writing or film and how it sticks out, but to me, it just kind of feels ADHD here. It feels like I'm seeing a scene shift in tone midway through, and that's kind of annoying as well as unlikable. It's going to be pretty awkward building off a ranking of episodes I don't even remember, so I'm just going to not. I'll make a new list for the new reviews I'm doing and get back to adding them together when I watch the old episodes. For this, I only watched the episode Best of Enemies, and Old Me was right. It is pretty good. It made me smile many times. So, current ranking is number 1, Best of Enemies. Number 2 is this. Just kidding. Not sure how I'll get the motivation for watching the others, though. Bye.